Chapter 33. The grounds surrounding the house of Professor Slocum had long been protected by an ancient spell which afforded the sage advance warning of all who entered there. Upon this night, as upon countless others past, he sat at his study desk, deep in thought. Before him was spread Ordnance Survey Map TQ17NE, and upon this cartographical representation of the borough, the lines of the Great Star Stadium were etched in green ink within the blued boundaries of the Brentford Triangle. The professor worked tirelessly with compass and protractor as a long black automobile of advanced design and uncertain nationality drew to a silent halt beyond the walls of his domain. The liveried chauffeur stepped from the cab and opened the rear door, a handkerchief clasped across his face. Professor Slocum reached toward the tantalus and poured a single dry sherry. A slight tingling at the nape of his neck set his head on one side, but he shrugged it off and continued with his work. The unbearable stench which then soured his nostrils and the cold chill which swept up his backbone set him bolt upright in his chair.
"Professor Slocum,"
came a harsh whisper.
"am I not to be invited in?"
The old man swung about with a gasp of surprise.
"You appear startled,"
said the figure who now stood in the French windows. Professor Slocum regained his composure with some difficulty. The fact that someone had actually slipped unfelt into his presence was sufficient to rattle him considerably, but the appearance of his uninvited guest was one to inspire horror. He was of medium height, clad in a suit of dark stuff, but of his actual physiognomy what could be seen was all at odds with all normality. The upper part of the head was covered by what appeared to be a plastic film, strung tightly to contain a mass of ugly folds and bulges. Across the eyes, a complicated contraption served as an optical aid, with artificial eyelids which opened and closed at measured intervals. The mouth was hardly visible beneath a bulbous, shapeless nose.
"Calm yourself, Professor,"
whispered the apparition.
"I must apologize for my intrusion, and also for my appearance. I am not pleasant to gaze upon, I know. Might I sit down? I have little strength."
Professor Slocum nodded.
"Please do so. Can I offer you anything?" "No, do not trouble yourself. I have learned to live with my infirmity."
The intruder moved awkwardly. His legs seemed to bend in the wrong places, low at the ankles, high at the misshapen thighs. Whatever was contained within the folds of the dark suit was a human form far gone in disfiguring malady. Professor Slocum winced as the invalid lowered himself into a fireside chair. His every movement appeared to cause him excruciating pain. "You are in evident discomfort," said the professor. "Might I ask the nature of your illness? I have some skills in healing." No. The intruder raised a gloved hand.
"You will not find it listed in any encyclopedia, pharmacia, nor in any one of your extraordinary books."
He made an inclusive gesture toward the professor's vast collection of thaumaturgical librams.
"I am a scientist, a victim of my own experimentation."
Professor Slocum raised an eyebrow. The being had much the look of one who had tampered with occult forces and become subject to the threefold law of return, whereby an evil sending rebounds upon the magician thrice powerfully.
"That, I can assure you, is not the case,"
whispered the intruder, breaking in upon the thoughts of his unwilling host. Professor Slocum lowered a mental shield and watched in fascination as a shiver ran through the body of his guest.
"As you now understand, My infirmity has brought with it some compensations. They say that when one sense is lost, the others become heightened. In my case, I have lost almost all my senses. I now possess others that most men would fail to understand. You are an unusual man, to say the very least. I might well say the same about you.
The Professor composed the fingers of his right hand into a curious grouping.
And now that we have exchanged these pleasantries, I suggest that you outline the purpose of your visit. Quite so, but I sense that during the brief moments of our acquaintanceship, you have already surmised who I am and suspect why I am here. I believe you are the organizer of the games, the designer of the stadium, and the inventor of the improbable gravitate. Do I detect a note of chagrin in your pronunciation of the word improbable? Who are you, and what do you want? My name is not important. For the sake of commerce, I am called Caleton. Do not waste yourself trying to read into it. It was chosen at random. I am here upon what you might call a diplomatic mission to engender a peaceful coexistence between us.
As a thief in the night, said the Professor, quoting scripture. Ignoring this, Caleton said simply,
I am dying.
You seek my help.
On the contrary, I seek only that you do not hinder me.
In dying? Caleton's mouth became a perfect O, and an exhalation of rancid air escaped from it. Professor Slocum, who had switched off his olfactory sense upon Caleton's entrance, sat back in his chair, fearing the spread of disease.
The games, said Caleton. The stadium and the games are to be my epitaph. I may not live to see them, but through them I will live forever.
Posthumous fame for one who will not reveal his true name to the public. How can this be?
By their deeds shall you know them.
But at what expense?
Expense? Deaths have already occurred. I believe you must answer for them.
Sounds came from Caleton's mouth, sounds of coarse, mocking laughter.
No one has died, Professor,
he crowed.
Are you too so easily fooled?
Not as easily as you might believe.
The creation of holographic images as a security system. Guard dogs without teeth, without substance, conjured from the its of the trespassers. Effective, do not think.
The chimera on the barge and the island griffin?
Advanced optical trickery, nothing more.
I think not, Caleton. Professor Slocum reached beneath his desk and brought out Pooley's present.
And this? All right, said Caleton. The creation of the stadium is too important to risk interruption from meddling ne'er-do-wells.
Quite simply, you are prepared to kill in order to protect your interests, your immortality.
Men die daily, men without vision, without worth. My genius will benefit the entire planet.
Monomania. You are sick, not only in body, but also in mind.
If you are not for me, then you are against me.
Then I am against you, in body and soul. I do not fully comprehend your true motives, but I suspect them to be anything other than beneficial to mankind.
I request that you leave immediately.
Calaton climbed with difficulty to his feet and stood with his back to the professor.
You are an annoyance, said he. I think perhaps I should be rid of you.
That might prove more difficult than you can imagine.
You say that, knowing how simply I avoided the spell of protection which surrounded your house.
You will not invade my privacy with such ease in the future, I can assure you. Calaton's head revolved slowly until it reached a point midway between his malformed shoulder blades.
You have no future,
he said, in a voice which might have been one or a chorus of many.
You are finished.
Leave now, while you're still able.
I think not.
Calaton's mouth widened, became a gaping maw, devoid of teeth, gums, or tongue. A torrent of icy wind swept from it, striking the professor from his chair and blasting him against the wall. But the effect was momentary, for the sage rose from behind his desk and stared defiantly at his attacker, words of an ancient formula upon his lips. Above the study, Jim Pooley reclined in rose-scented bathwater, a copy of the Lazio Woodbine thriller Farewell at My Window propped up before him upon the bath-rack.
That lies, said Jim. He slays me.
In a house, not so very far away, John Omally lazed upon silken sheets, clad only in his boxer shorts. Before him, humming gently to herself, Jennifer Naylor shed her outer garments. Calaton raised a crooked hand to fend off the tongue of darting fire which leapt towards him. The flames froze into glassy splinters tinkling onto the Persian carpet to dissolve into nothingness. A look of perplexity crossed the Professor Slocum's face as he summoned the powers that greater words commanded. Calaton made a single gesture, and the world which was the Professor's study vanished, became a darkened sphere enclosing only himself and the Magus.
There is no future,
whispered the crippled man,
not for you or any of your cohorts.
Jennifer Naylor's brassiere fell to the floor, exposing a pair of breasts most men could only dream of witnessing first hand. Omally felt the mark of his manhood rising to meet the occasion as the rare beauty slipped her thumbs into her silken cami knickers and dropped them to her feet.
Only you and I, said Calaton.
Only you and I, echoed Jennifer Naylor. Professor Slocum made a series of lightning passes with his old frail hands. Before him, a wall of white chitin composed itself, and behind the light returned as a small opening, through which he stepped backwards with some alacrity. He was once more at his desk, but from within the dark sphere the wall of protection crumbled away, and the image of Calaton swam into view, swelling ever larger, the black mouth spread encompassing all before it.
"And so die!"
came the chorus of 1,000 voices, which were also only one. "And so die," said Jennifer Naylor. Her left hand slid up behind her back, rose to the nape of her neck, where it took hold of something which might have been a zip fastener. She drew it down the length of her naked spine. Calaton's image bulged and grew. The mouth was a great black hole, all-consuming, a bottomless pit into which all must surely fall. The Professor folded his arms across his chest and uttered the syllables of his final spell. The outer shell, which had been the skin of the bogus Jennifer Naylor, dropped to the floor, a crumpled, empty husk. Before Omally stood a group of elemental horrors supported one upon another in a writhing mass, which momentarily retained Jennifer's shape before tumbling towards the boy in the boxer shorts. "Hell's teeth," said John Omally, which was a close approximation. The things swept towards him in a heaving, crying cacophony. Great, bloated maggots with the heads of babies, beasts all spine and scorpion stings, bladders and entrails, eyeless heads with one mouth set beneath another. A gross and fetid stench burned the air like fumes of acid. Omally flattened himself against the bedhead as the whirling, screaming nightmare engulfed him. Up and be gone! Professor Slocum raised his arms and exerted the final issue of his strength, spoke the final syllable of the great spell. The black image wavered in intensity, crumpled in upon itself with a deafening explosion, regathered in a cluster of spinning fragments, and finally flew upwards through the ceiling, an icy maelstrom of escape and energy. Jim Pooley howled in anguish as his bathwater froze into a solid block of ice. In a room of unutterable blackness, Professor Slocum collapsed unconscious to the floor. In the bedroom of a house not so very far away, a thick green slime dripped down a silken sheet to mingle in a pool of human blood. "Help!" wailed a living iceberg in a marble bath. "Help! Help! Help!"